It's good to be with you. So I'm quite proud of it. First off, I really wasn't expecting to do this, but I want to say this just before we take this out of feedback. The last speaker said something that I disagree with slightly. That's okay. I just wanted to make a point of it. And that's not how you make a mistake. No, actually, it's that the mask is not a torture device. And I don't think governors or anybody else is requiring them as a visual symbol of control, right? I understand hyperbole, but I think it's important in this environment that we talk about these things frankly. I think if you can get a vaccine, you should. And there's a lot of conspiracies around this. But I have to ask people, why in the hell do you think Bill Gates would need to inject you with a microchip when you have a pocket full of microchips that you pay him for? And if you can't get a vaccine, I think a mask is a whole hell of a lot better than nothing when it comes to protecting yourself from the recycled air on a plane. So, this is to say that personally, I love masks. Having said that, I should point out I'm probably a lot more happy to be able to walk past the security camera in the middle of summer without getting recognized than most people. And this is to say that different people care about different things. I don't know how we forgot about that. And that is the part that I think so much policy today is. Whether we're talking about public health, whether we're talking about technology, or whether we're talking about something very, very different. It should be a choice.
Yes!
I've been thinking about this for years and years and years, and I just started sort of developing a new way of expressing this, because, back in 2013, there was an enormous amount of polling done about mass surveillance and the privacy issue, and why some Americans responded strongly to it and why others didn't care at all. And they found out that people don't know what privacy means. They saw that Americans cared very deeply about language, like freedoms, and like liberty. And if you phrased a question in regards to NSA surveillance as an infringement of liberty and freedoms, you would get a better response. But if you asked people what liberty or freedoms meant, it was actually very abstract. People didn't have a good grasp on it. They couldn't communicate freedom. They had an emotional association, but they couldn't express the meaning of the words. And that meaning of words got me thinking about something that matters to me so much in my life. When you think about computation today, when you think about what you can do with your phone, what you can't do, when you think about you're on a network at work or at home, or you try to connect to a website, you have to establish permission. Right? Do you have permission to the file? Do you have permission to log in? How is it going to track what you do? Who you communicate with? Click OK to continue. Now, the etymology of that word, permission, is so elementary that it seems to have become invisible. The per in permission means through, as in to perspire, to breathe through our skin. We're things that pervade, permeate, or perforate. And upon hearing the latter half of our word, the mission permission, you might recall instinctively a lot of these words that just jump out from classic uses that evoke its sense of movement, that mission so clearly, such as transmission or emission, to those ever so slightly more poetic applications, like the return to silence of reach health, or the forgotten origin of that word invoked so strongly by the last speaker, submission, to move yourself beneath. Now, together, the two halves of the word permission originally meant movement beyond. Yet the modern application of that word rests upon, I think, exclusion of the movement, isolating the possibility avenues are being closed off, right? Movement beyond. In the ancient world we're today, the question is there. What is it that we are moving beyond, right? Beyond what are we moving? Beyond the gate. What gate? Where did it come from? Who put it there? That gate, the authority to indulge, deny the human impulse to adventure, is the avatar of monarchy. It stands in opposition to the natural or unpermissioned state. Liberty. At its core, all of our myths, all of our poetry adorning the language of liberty, struggle in liberty to communicate that fundamental forgotten meaning of it. Freedom from permission. That's what liberty is, freedom from permission. To speak and to write and to do and to be yourself without getting the paper stamped and submitting the completed form or yourself to the authority of a superior. I'm afraid that many have forgotten that the only intended limitation on your liberty is the protection of liberty for all others. Now, I know this is probably not what a lot of people were expecting coming in and being like gay masses, right? But it's not about this, and I think you understand that now. But some of you may not agree with all of this, and that's okay. I'm not used to that. I am accused, and by our government, of committing a very serious crime, which is precisely this: telling the truth when it makes people uncomfortable. You know, that's a big deal. They made it very clear to me that there's a difference between working for the government and working for the public. And that's probably a little strange to hear now. But these are strange times. Wherever you are, wherever you come from, whatever our differences are, whatever you believe, whatever I believe, we want you to think about this broken system. Maybe you don't think it's broken, maybe you think it's fabulous. But look at this system and look at what you see happening in this world. And then I've been asking, did you agree to this? Does this represent your will? Is this your intention? Is this what you want it to be? What is the distance between the world that we have today and the world as it should be? Are we moving toward it? Are we moving away from it? Do you feel represented? You know, we're told we have a representative democracy. We're told that's the system. And I think lawmakers would say that it doesn't matter. The police would say you don't have a choice, stop resisting. And Facebook would say that you actually consented to this. But I don't think you did, and I bet you don't think so either, right? And this is the problem. Gates are everywhere. They pretend that we consented to their construction. They pretend that we consent to whatever their terms of service are passed through them. They pretend that we agreed that simply because of where we were born, or where we had no choice but to live, or simply because we had to click OK to continue in order to use our phones, that we support this, that this reflects our desires, that we are a part of this, as opposed to subject to this. And that gets me thinking about technology. You know, I come from a time where, the smartphone didn't exist.
Right.
And the oldest of you still, maybe remember that briefly. But for some of the people in this room, different friends, there are people who have always seen it the way that it is today. And there is this idea, particularly amongst libertarian circles, right? Because we don't want government intrusion, we don't want government regulation, whatever. The power of the contract is supreme. But what happens when that contract is intentionally exploitative? We cannot commit ourselves to a contract to be murdered. We can't commit ourselves to a contract of servitude for the rest of our life for no pay or whatever. There are certain terms that are so violent, that are so extreme, that are so unbalanced, that it calls the contract itself into question. And yet we built a system of technology that is sitting in your pocket, your hand, right now. The same systems that are beaming me to you so we can have this conversation. That we have no choice but to engage with. In many cases, there are no alternatives, or no practical alternatives. You can't get a job today without a smartphone. You can't engage in commerce, you can't trade, you can't interact with any of these systems, you can't participate meaningfully in society without a bank, without subjecting yourself to KYC processes, know your customer processes, without showing your passport, without showing your driver's license, without giving them your address, without handing them a credit card number, without handing them some kind of security, and again and again and again and again to the point where you do everything you're supposed to. You work hard, you earn money, you put it on the counter, you buy a new phone. You're excited to have it, you're happy to have it. It will allow you to do new things, to reach more people, to show a different side of yourself, to engage in connecting. You pull it out of the box, you turn it on, and before you can even use the thing, up pops another contract. It's 600 pages long, and the very first line says, these terms can change at any time without notice. How can you agree to a contract that no one knows, that can change without notice? And yet, you can't move to the next step without clicking OK to continue. Well, it's not okay. We have to continue. We don't have a choice. And what we are doing every step of this, whether it's a website and its stupid cookie banner, whether it's Facebook, whether it's a Gmail, because it's half of you guys, everybody's on Gmail, whether it's Instagram, whether it's whatever, whether it's to register for this conference, right? You're clicking OK, you're agreeing to these different things. And step by step, we are submitting ourselves to the compilation of perfect records about our private lives. And we have no choice, because we have to do that in order to exist in practice, what we do today. And it's important to recognize that there is no consent. There is no contract, not in any way that matters. And I think that in what every person in every place today is realizing that lack of consent matters. Whether we're talking about technology or whether we're talking about internet, we are recognizing that, speaking quite plainly, we have been ignored. This pandemic, whatever side you come down on, whether you are willing to get a vaccine, whether you're not willing to, whether you're willing to wear a mask or you're not willing to, the pandemic will be gone. But the rates that we lose in response to the passage of emergency laws, they're gone forever. Because there's nothing in the world more permanent than a temporary leave. And we need to ask, where does that lead us? For me, it leads to the question of all of these hoops, all of these gates, all of these stamped forms, all of these permissions, all of these click OK to continue flags set in databases. Where we need to ask, why is it that it's not about us? Why home and football? We need to talk about digital security, which is to say, digital insecurity, that's being forced upon our lives. And the surveillance, I think, that occurs as a result of that largely. This is one. It's not like when the Obama administration was called red-handed surveillance of Americans, which was not exceptional to that administration, the Bush administration, the Trump administration. He just had the rare fortune, you call it, really unusual, remarkable way relative to Bush, where again, he was caught in a mass surveillance. But with the help of the courts, and with the help of the courts, they largely buried it. And when we talk about surveillance, we're going to be talking about fraud. Why? Because all this data, why are people interested? And this is where we get back to that, is the mask, a symbol of control? No. Clicking OK to continue is the expression of control. Because people are only interested in that data for the utility. And outside of academia, what we're talking about is the influence that data provides. Whether we're talking about Facebook determining what ads we see, or something more positive, information is a lever for attaining and expressing certain power. That power is control. In democracy, we like to believe typically the control of the general outline of society is intended to be exercised by with their will imposed the powerful institutions that would otherwise rule our lives. Be they the police with their powers of detention, arrest, imprisonment, killing, or military-inspired agencies, or even, free market corporations with their exploitative means to actually limit the proper function. And I think that's the difficult thing that your generation is going to be called to confront, whether you like it or not. The call is already there. You can feel it, even if you can't hear it, right? Because people aren't expressing it quite in this way. We're still thinking about reform, we're still thinking about proper channels and process and procedures. Can we elect this person? Is it going to work? Will we put forward this new bill? Will it happen at the national level? Will it happen at the state level? Can we challenge it forwards? It will be wonderful if we can, and it works. What if it doesn't? Because when we look at the status quo today, we are no longer in control as people. Surveillance technologies particularly outpace democratic controls. And these are no longer inherently governmental functions. They're being performed by not only every other government, not only by local governments, but by for-profit enterprises, who, unfortunately, because the United States has no basic privacy. We have the Fourth Amendment, right, which can bind the federal government and the state governments in some, except for circumstances. It does nothing to restrain what private companies can do. And maybe that's an idea that people get hot for. I think that would have been more persuasive 10 or 20 years ago when I was a young man. I was reading the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace, written with soaring length. You weary giants of flesh and steel, you, the humans of the old age, are coming before us, the new age, the new place. You have no influence, you have no power. How naive we were. We had it for a moment, but we did not protect it. We did not enforce it. And so it was stolen from us. And so the advance of technology was made not to serve us, to make us serve others. A generation of this was extremely expensive. Governments had spent huge sums to track individuals. To know some location might involve teams of officers both inside buildings and out in the street, working in shifts. Today, they just call the phone. And whether you've got your location services turned on, whether you've got GPS turned off, none of that matters. Because you have your phone connected to the network. If you can hook something up, if you can call someone, if they can call you, the network knows where you are. Think about how else would your phone ring out of any other phone in the world? Only one rings when people die. How do the network know which phone to make ring? They know where you are. They know what cell phone tower needs to be told to send an alert to what particular heat set. That's just how these systems were designed during an era where we did not have a full understanding of what would be coming down the line. And that means, for the first time in human history, it is technically and financially feasible for governments to track and store complete records. If you think about AT&T, for example, those private corporations that we like, but I think most libertarians understand. AT&T holds calling records going back to 1987. And they sell them to the DEA as a service without requiring the entirety of the traditional judicial process. They see it not as records about you, not records that you own, but these are records that they own, that they created value after. So why shouldn't they do so? And unfortunately, the Supreme Court in the 1970s upheld it. It's called Smith versus Maryland, the third-party agreement. The Supreme Court in the 1970s could not have imagined the implications that that case would have today. We are beginning, thankfully, to turn that back a little bit. There's a new way. And it's important to understand that being able to observe programmatically a large portion of the human activity in every place, by every person, is no longer science fiction. It's happening now. This doesn't mean people are putting on headsets and listening to you. Don't need to do that. We have voice to text transcription. Feed it through a system that can provide a transcript. I don't believe that's happening in mass scale. But soon those kind of problems will be tractable. And that is the question of the last few decades. How we got here, where my generation failed, is in failing to recognize that governments don't ask for permission. They deployed these capabilities in secret, even when they knew, and in their own top secret documents, they said these programs were unlawful or unconstitutional, perhaps because they knew this, they kept it secret. And this effort was enabled because of failures in our intended mechanisms of constitutional oversight, right? If the courts that were unwilling to permit legal challenges and the Congress that was permitting national security officials to brazenly lie to the public without consequence, break the record, what then is the purpose of checks and balances? There are many checks, but no balance. And that makes me question fundamentally, who is it that's really in charge? This may have sounded a little bit depressing, but I'm actually extraordinarily hopeful. Because people realize what's happening. And not everyone, not everywhere. More you are here for a reason. You could be out enjoying summer day, instead you're here listening to a bunch of people talk. Because I think you have the same question. Do the institutions of state, do the institutions of commerce work for us, work for society? Or are we being made to work for them? Everywhere we look, we are no longer being given a choice. There's always a gate. And if you want to go about your life, you're going to have to ask permission to cross it. We need to look at who the people are who are building these gates. Who are those who are responsible for maintaining them? And who is it that's keeping us from tearing them down? Because, ladies and gentlemen, there comes a point in life that I know very few, where a free person tires from asking for permission. And if we are ever to achieve our independence, our resolve to explore must become greater than the height of the walls that we place around us. As a Chinese descent, was driven from his country for criticism of the regime. I was looking at the menu for unpublished. And reading it made me realize that an artist without courage is just a decorator. And accordingly, a citizen without courage is a subject. This is the principle, and any other, that is the foundation of the America that I believe in. And I think any one of you here today remembers that as everything we need to change the world.